Welcome back to another MOTOBOB video, and you join me in the studio again with this incredible looking electric motorcycle. It's the Maeving RM1. And look, I'll be straight up with you, a performance bike this is not. In fact, it's actually pretty slow. But for a bike of this nature, personally, I don't think it really matters. So in this video, we'll go through all the specs and details, and I'll tell you why I think Maeving have made the right call on this one. Now you see, this bike isn't pretending to be a competitor to stuff like the Livewire 1 or the Zero lineup or the Energicas. It's not meant to be a replacement for your super naked petrol bikes where you're going off and doing 200 miles at a decent clip at the weekend. It's actually a much more sedate affair. So this Bosch hub motor makes 4 horsepower continuous or 5.9 horsepower peak, so really not a lot, but that's because they've designed it exclusively to be a city bike. So in the most aggressive of the 3 power modes that it comes with, it'll top out at 45 miles per hour, and the range isn't massive either, so you get 40 miles per battery. There are 2 of them, so one down in the body of the bike where the engine would typically be, and then you can also put one in the tank here. So you can get up to 80 miles combined, but still, if you compare it to what's available elsewhere on the electric motorcycle market, you know, it's not groundbreaking. It also doesn't support super fast charging, so it just charges from a regular domestic socket, and it will take 4 hours for a full charge or 3 hours for 80%. Even the chassis setup is pretty rudimentary, so stuff like the suspension and brakes are Chinese made, and you've got twin shocks at the rear, a right way up fork at the front, and then a link braking system with a single disc at the front and a single at the rear. And this right hand lever does the front brake only, the left hand lever gives you a little bit of both, and so that's a legal requirement for bikes that don't have ABS. So pretty basic stuff, it does the job, but it's not exactly Olin suspension and Brembo brakes. And so if the retro sort of cafe racer styling had you expecting Triumph Thruxton levels of performance, then you're certainly going to be disappointed. But the thing is, it wouldn't necessarily be sensible to build something more performance orientated than this at the moment, and Triumph said it themselves recently when I went and spoke to them about their electric motorcycle concept.
It's a huge amount of investment to go from developing something that is a prototype vehicle that we've used for our learning and understanding to actually getting this into a showroom as something that you can buy. And quite simply, the cost of things like batteries, for example, and also the motors, mean that this would have to come in at a significantly higher price than an existing speed triple, for example. Look, the batteries, the tech, the range, the charging, the prices, they're all not really quite there yet for sporty road bikes. And so really, it's only in the urban environment that electric motorcycles are actually viable at the moment. Lower speeds, shorter distances, more opportunities to charge. But that does give you a completely different set of requirements for designing a successful motorcycle. Fortunately, I think Maeving have done a decent job, and so here are 4 of the main areas in which I think they've succeeded.
But before we get into those, I just want to say a massive thanks to Alpaca Bags for sponsoring this video. They make a range of super stylish sling bags and backpacks that are perfect for carrying your stuff on the bike when you're commuting around town. I've been using their Bravo Sling Mini for carrying essentials like your phone, wallet or keys, or if I'm on the way to work, I use their Elements backpack for taking a laptop and all the associated peripherals. I'm super impressed by the quality and the cool designs, and they're really well thought out with loads of pockets and straps and neat features like the magnetic connectors that are still easy to operate even when you're wearing motorcycle gloves. I'd thoroughly recommend checking them out, and they've also been kind enough to give me a 15% discount code for my viewers, which you can find down in the description. So once again, a massive thanks to Alpaca for their support. Now, I lived in London for many years, and let me tell you, it's a very hard place to find properties in central areas with a garage. I rented a council garage garage for a few years that was a couple of miles from our house, and I had to rig up some solar lights because it didn't have any mains power. So charging an electric motorcycle is always going to be difficult because you'll either have to roll it onto the pavement right up to your house or run a cable across the pavement to where it's parked on the street, both of which are a little awkward / maybe illegal. Much better, in my opinion, to have these removable batteries which you can just whip out and charge inside, be that at home or in the office. Also, you've got to say hats off to Maeving for the cool design. I love the way that the sort of futuristic flap on the tank opens up and really contrasts with the overall retro aesthetic. Now look, 40 miles per battery doesn't sound like a massive amount, but it's actually about 17 miles from Oxford Circus right in the middle of London out to Uxbridge Station, which is pretty much right on the edge of the tube map and basically on the M25. So even with the single battery option, you could still make the longest possible commuter round trip in a UK city without having to charge. If you do have to charge it, well, again, that 4 hours might sound like a lot, but realistically, most people are going to be in the office for more than 4 hours at a time, and certainly when you get home, it's enough to charge it overnight. Also, you can get 2 chargers and juice both batteries up simultaneously.
You see, realistically, it's not gonna be your super experienced bikers that are gonna buy one of these to replace their Panigale. Hopefully, it's gonna be the younger crowd in the cities looking for a way to get on their first bike. And a brilliant little gateway bike it is. It weighs just 124 kilograms, or 112 if you run it in the single battery setup. And the seat sits at just 785 mils, so it's not at all intimidating and pretty similar in stature to a 125 learner bike. Now the handling is nice and stable, which is exactly what you want when you're new to biking, but it's also plenty agile enough to make easy U-turns and pick your way through city traffic. Now, like I say, the suspension is fairly basic, as are the brakes, but really you don't need super sharp MotoGP spec braking when you're only doing 20 or 30 miles per hour. And while the ride could be a little bit more refined, it's certainly good enough for the city commute. I'd also say that the power delivery and the throttle are super smooth and accessible. So you've got Mode 1, which is Sport, so that's the most aggressive. Mode 2, which is called Balanced. And then 3 is range mode. So if you're running a little low on battery, then you can go into this mode and it'll limit your speed and hopefully get you home. But look, whatever mode you're in, we're in 1 here, which is Sport. You know, give it full throttle and it actually sort of gently delivers the power, ekes it out for you so that it's, you know, easy for even the least experienced rider. Then there's the fact that you can ride it on a CBT. I mean, it's so expensive to get into biking nowadays. You've got to buy the bike, the gear, the insurance, the tax, the petrol, all that stuff. So it's quite nice to see something super desirable that you can actually get on with the most simple and accessible license type.
And when I say desirable, I really mean it. I mean, look at it. Who wouldn't want one of these in the garage? The founders behind the Maeving say the inspiration comes from a couple of historic British motorcycling sources when it comes to the aesthetic of the RM1.
So for styling, we've really focused on 2 eras of British motorcycle design. So the first being what's known as the board tracker era. So this is the sort of turn of the century when the first motorbikes were being built traditionally from bicycle frames with little engines put on them. And this created really sort of lightweight, minimalist designs. We've also sort of somewhat naturally focused on the cafe racer era, which is really the kind of darling of British motorcycle design from the 50s and 60s.
Clearly, it's a great looking bike and it'll be sure to start a conversation or 2 when you're out and about. People just want to stop you and know all about it. But as well as the striking retro shape, I think it's the neatness of the design and finish that also help. Like I say, the way that the battery compartments open, the fact that you can use that dummy fuel tank as a 10-litre storage compartment if you run a single battery, the thought to put a USB port inside for charging your devices, the ridiculously high attention to detail and finish on the batteries themselves, and then also the feeling of the switchgear, the layout of the clock, and the nice little bits of hardware like the bar end mirrors, the saddle, and the foot pegs. You know, it all adds up to something that really does look special for the price. Speaking of which, I think the price is pretty decent too. So it's just under £5,000 for the single battery and just
just under 6 for the Dual. For context, it's probably most equivalent to something like the Super Soco TC Max. Now that bike costs between 4 and 5 grand depending on the spec, or you can get the standard TC for around 3 grand, but that one's limited to 28 miles per hour tops. So yeah, really the TC Max is the closest in performance. Either way, the Maeving does come up a little pricey, but personally, I know which one I'd rather be riding. You're always going to pay a little more for something as beautifully designed as this, and it really is a special thing to look at and ride.
So look, thinking back to those electric big bikes that I mentioned earlier, the Livewire, the Zeros, the Energicas, you know, the ones that still don't quite cut it when you compare them to their petrol equivalents for recreational rural riding. If you take them and put them in the city, are they as affordable as this? No. Are they as accessible to ride for beginners? No. Can you charge them as easily from your house or office? No. And are they as good looking as this? Well, personally, in my opinion, no. Maeving have designed a specific tool to do a specific job, and that's city riding. Don't get yourself under any pretenses that you can go off and set off down a country road and have a blast. It's too slow and the range isn't good enough. But Maeving know that, and they've designed something that fits the bill for where the tech and market are at right now. As always, I'd love to know what you think of the bike down in the comments below. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.